everybody, and welcome to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider. Welcome back, everybody, for our second episode. So a couple of things. If you guys have questions and comments for me and my guests throughout the next 40 or 45 minutes or so, please feel free to throw them in to the comments, and we'll try to get to most of your questions if you have them along the way. So given it's our second show, I just wanted to kind of talk about the why. So maybe unlike other exit planning shows, and maybe a little bit uniquely for me, I kind of wear three hats here at EPI. One, certainly a business owner. Two, an educator. And three, an advisor, although I probably can be advised by these two gentlemen more so than being an advisor myself. But nonetheless, what I wanted to do in the Exit Is Now podcast is really showcase my own story as a business owner and how we at EPI and as owners and business leaders, how we walk through the value acceleration methodology and create not just a successful company, but a significant one. So my guests here today are two gentlemen that are absolute all-stars. I was saying, Sean, before the show, I was going to call you the Larry Bird of exit planning, but they call my dad that. So let's say that he's the Michael Jordan of exit planning. And then we were laughing at breakfast with Justin over here because Justin's kind of like the podcast king. So I'm actually a little nervous having Justin here because if you've ever been on Financially Simple, you could see he's done. How many episodes have you done over there?
400.
400. So we're number 2. So thanks for coming on and hold the critiques till after the show. But nonetheless, in all seriousness, so both of these gentlemen are certified exit planning advisors. Sean, one of the originals. So if you tuned in a couple weeks ago to our last episode, I had Chris Snider, my dad, on, and I think you beat him in certificates, Sean. So my dad's number 93, and Sean sat right next to my dad in class back in 2008. He's certificate, I looked it up before the show, 86.
86.
So 86. Right. So long-time CEPA, 15 or so years being a certified exit planning advisor. And then Justin came through the CEPA program about 6 or 7 years ago, 2017, back in the old days when we had the in-person program. But both of these gentlemen are also exit planners of the year, Justin being our most recent exit planner of the year last year at our exit planning summit. And then more personally, they are dear friends to me. I appreciate you guys flying in for this. And they're advisors to both me and Dad. And Sean, I always say that Sean's kind of seen me certainly grow up through value acceleration, or certainly grow up through the Exit Planning Institute. And last but not least, uniquely, both certainly advisors, but both business owners. And Justin being an exit business owner too. So a lot of questions, I think, for these guys, not just as experts in the space, but advisors and owners themselves. So gentlemen, let's kind of dive into it. So last episode, I wanted to start with Dad and kind of take him all the way back to 2008. Really, I took him all the way back to 2006. Where Dad started his consulting firm, Aspire Management, and at Aspire Management, he kind of went those 2 years and decided that there was something missing. Right? He calls it that actually the second and third legs of the stool. And he came to EPI to become certified and learn about those next two legs. And we've talked about this kind of evolution of exit planning. And given your 15 years as a CEPA, your 6 or 7 years as a CEPA. I wanted to see what you guys think about exit planning. Like, where has it come from 15 years ago, and where's it at today? Like this evolution of exit planning, and it's kind of a big theme for me this year because the value acceleration methodology has actually turned 10 years old. So we debuted it in the CEPA program in the spring May CEPA program of 2013. So Sean, maybe start with you since you're the veteran of the group here. So talk to me about where you think exit planning, where it started when you sat in that class in 2008, and where it is today in 2023, 15 years later.
Yeah, it's hard to believe how far it's come in those 15 years almost. But in the Wayback Machine in 2008, we were taught to create an artifact. We would create something called an exit plan. We weren't taught about process or methodology or anything like that. So the whole course really was about how many sections are there going to be in the 3-ring notebook. Right, and then we would kind of drop this big heavy thing on the conference room table for our clients, for the owners, and it would kick off a little cloud of dust and never to be seen again. It was like a big fat business plan in a sense. But when the value acceleration methodology came in, the whole focus of the program began to be about driving value. Remember, that was not part of the original conversation. It seems so intuitive to us now with the value acceleration methodology and working with owners to increase the value of the business. That was not present in 2008. So the whole vocabulary has changed in 15 years. But we've also got a much more diverse group of CEPAs. We've got better tech. We've got a much larger knowledge base. We're learning from one another. We get together. All these things that was the dream of the Exit Planning Institute in a way, right? Create methodology, create process, create knowledge base, and create community. And it's taken a long time, I think, to build that community. Remember, I was number 86. Think about being in a community that's 100 people versus where we are today, which is thousands of people. It accelerates what business owners need.
Yeah, I do remember. That's funny that you bring that up. So I remember when my dad became a CEPA, he literally had like a huge, not even a bound book, like a binder that was sent to him.
That's right.
Then when we bought EPI, we went to CD-ROMs.
Yeah.
Then we got real sophisticated, went to thumb drives. But some people had started to bring tablets to the class, so they couldn't plug it in.
That's right, yeah.
And then obviously we're here today. So Justin, kind of over to you, kind of same question. So your certificate number 695. So I looked that up too. So 695. So still new, right? Within the first 1,000 CEPAs, a few years after Sean. I think that he makes a good point about by the time you came along, right? There's 600-700 people that are CEPAs, and I think the collaboration is key, right? I think that's a good point that we're not kind of learning, and then when you came, it was like 100, 120 people, and kind of going out into the universe and operating. Now you actually can come together with 600 individuals that want to learn and kind of grow together.
Yeah, by the time I came through the experience, we had 2 or 3 courses around value acceleration at that point, which is still, it's developed even further today at this point. I think you make a great point around the community, but what I've seen even in addition to that is the consumer base now understands more than ever what exit planning is. It used to be succession planning, and that had this very nebulous type of idea around it. What does it truly mean? Does it mean I'm gonna bring a key employee up and then give it to the particular employee? Now, years later, 6-7 years that I've experienced is now we say exit planning, and even the business owner understands it's a multitude of options, not just, hey, I'm passing it down to my child or to my significant other or to a key employee. So we have seen the community itself evolve. We've seen the education from the community just accelerate, which has now trickled down to the key decision makers, those business owners over the last 6 or 7 years.
It's created a marketplace.
Absolutely.
Which didn't exist.
It really has, right? I think, and to your point about this kind of collaboration or diversity in the community, right? So I think that it used to be actually heavily CPAs when you and Dad came.
I remember that.
Yeah, you guys are probably pretty unique in that group. Now
I think so.
Yeah, right? And now it's more, I think, financial advisors mixed with CPAs and mixed with gentlemen like you that are value advisors, and then the attorneys and the M&A advisors. But today, and I want to get your perspective on this. So a couple years ago, I guess it is now, or maybe a year and a half ago, Dad and I decided to name me the president of the Exit Planning Institute. And so with that, I wanted to release a new vision for the future. And back when both of you became certified exit planning advisors, we concentrated a lot on, and rightfully so, we concentrated a lot on changing the outcome. We wanted to change the outcome for business owners. And to me, I dove deeper into that, started peeling the layer of the onion kind of back, and I said, what does that really mean? And for me, I fell on this thing that I guess we hear a lot in different scenarios, but it's moving companies from successful to significant. And for me, you guys could probably relate, I think many business owners feel that they have something successful year over year. And I was actually reading your book, Justin, in prep for and I highlighted this because it was like right out of the gate in the why. It says, you're talking about business owners, right? And it says, when the world sees a business owner, they see success. They see a nice home, a newer vehicle, exotic vacations, and the ability to set your own schedule. And to me, that's what a successful company is, right? I think a lot of owners have these nice things along the way, great employees, great customers, and then they go to sell their business and they're kind of slapped across the face because for the first time somebody's calling their baby ugly. And we also hear this exit strategy is business strategy. So I'd like to get your take on, maybe start with Justin, get your take on how are you and therefore owners kind of embracing that? Exit strategy is business strategy, moving from success to significance. You mentioned in your book too, like, let's just admit that our baby's ugly, right? Let's just admit it and fix it.
In order for us to admit that our baby is ugly, we have to embrace the fact that it is our baby, right? We have spent countless hours, blood, sweat, and tears, I often say, building this business from scratch many times, or buying it and accelerating. I mean, well, if you go on to read in that particular chapter, what we actually have is a fear. We have this major problem at night that we stay awake concerned about, hey, is a key employee going to leave? Is a key customer going to leave? Is the software going to crash? And the list goes on and on and on, right? So once we realize that that is in our head, whenever it comes time for an exit, whatever that may look like, it's going to be in whomever the next person or company is going to be. They're thinking the exact same thing and much more. So if we're implementing exit strategy into our business, I approach it through the world of finance. As you well know, I'm a certified financial planner for almost 20 years now. And I believe that the wealth gap, the simple calculation that we teach as part of the fundamental principles of CEPA, if we can help a business owner identify that there is a gap between where you're at in reality and where you aspire to be. If we can illustrate that mathematically, and quantify it, then everybody wins. The business owner wins. How many business owners have been approached with every single scenario underneath the sun? Every sales pitch out there, they've seen it all. But yet they understand the lifestyle they want to live. They understand where they want to be. They can already see their business in its present 5 years into the future. They know what they want it to look like. The danger is they don't know how to get there, and most of all, they're concentrated, which they realize that. They're trying to figure out how to unbundle it. So to me, bring it back to the wealth gap. You help them realize, hey, this is your business. This is your baby. Let's show you how to beautify it. Let's show you how it can become attractive. And whenever you place that into the business owner's life and in their purview where they understand it, they win.
Yeah. Sean, what do you think? Success with significance. What's that mean for you?
Yeah, I'd say three things. So one of the things that I said years ago is we have to get away from the idea that exit planning is a purely transactional process. It actually is transformational, right? So to a certain extent, when you talk about the gap between where you are and where you need to be financially, emotionally, whatever it might be, the journey from one point to another is actually going to change your life, right? That's going to feel different to people. It's going to be not just a financial context. It's going to be something that they haven't actually felt before. The process is also meant to unstick people. My feeling is that a lot of owners who have gotten to the point where they can actually think about this is just a source of income, so they begin to change the conversation using different words. That change in vocabulary is a really interesting pivot to see them go through, right? So you're talking about, you do the same thing, right? Success to significance. Just saying it out loud is powerful.
Yeah, I think
that gets people. Yeah. That gets people really, changing the context. When we talk about exit planning as business strategy, we're actually setting context for decision making, right? So business strategy is all about setting up scenarios and starting to make decisions about what kind of pathway you're going to choose, right? If you can't make good decisions quickly, then your business is going to suffer and the process is going to suffer. So at the end of the day, exit planning for me is all about setting a context for decision making, finding a different vocabulary, and also learning how to address what we call missing conversations. There are probably 100 missing conversations at any given time when you start this process. Part of it is to expose those and have them. That's important. That's how transformation happens.
So I want to build on this success of significance. I'm going to take a quick break for everybody. So we will be back just in a quick couple of minutes. So go grab a cup of coffee or water, and we'll be back to expand on success and significance.
Walking to Destiny was written to arm business owners and their advisors with the knowledge and understanding needed to recognize their potential, execute growth tactics, and harvest the wealth locked inside a business. Originally written in 2016 by the creator of the Value Acceleration Methodology, Chris Snider, Walking to Destiny 2.0 features a fresh and evolved look into the proven system to maximize value, grow income, and build a business that can be run without you, even if you never plan to leave. Discover how to align your business, personal, and financial goals. Distinguish between your business's attractiveness and readiness to transition. Measure the value of your intangible assets that likely contribute 80% of your company's value. Adopt a process to measure your results every 90 days. Walking to Destiny is the foundation for the Exit Planning Institute's Certified Exit Planning Advisor Credentialing Program. More than 5,000 advisors hold the CEPA designation, the world's leading exit planning credential. Grab your copy of Walking to Destiny 2.0 by visiting www.wtddownloads.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast, hanging out with Sean Hutchinson and Justin Goodbread. So if you guys are just tuning in, Sean is a partner over at RFN Global, actually fairly interesting business you guys should go check out. They have kind of three different elements, I would say. We were just talking to a couple of our new employees. We have some folks that go through, all of our new employees kind of go through Sean's one of Sean's academy courses to kind of as a part of their onboarding. And Justin Goodbread over here is the president of Wealth Source. So again, welcome back, gentlemen. Before we went to the break, we kind of started talking about this success to significance. And now I kind of want to talk about, okay, if we believe in that and we can get owners to believe in that, or maybe we're going to get owners to believe in that, how do we start to approach owners? And Sean, I kind of want to dive over to you first, because one of the things that I think that has really always stood out to me as I watched you teach through our CEPA program was you kind of talk about you have to meet the owners where they are, right? And you talk kind of about these like triggers, pivoters, and I just think that when I think about approaching the owner nowadays, even like I was in like an EO test drive group yesterday, looking at these other owners that were there, listening to them about their journeys as entrepreneurs, and some of them honestly 3 to 5 years away from and admittedly away from an exit. And where are they at, so I can actually start talking to them about the right way, so I can deliver that message of success to significance.
Yeah, so the story that you're referring to really came out of internal strategic planning for us, in which some of our new advisors were saying, what's our ideal client? And in that session, we started answering that question just like other advisors might. They have this much revenue, they're in these industries, they're healthy, they're not distressed, so on and so forth. And then it just seemed to come to a dead stop. And everyone said, wait a minute, why are we describing the client, who is the owner, as a business? Because we're not actually focusing, and I think you've talked about this, Justin, on who they are, what they need, where they want to go, what their value system is. So we started to think about it differently, and we identified kind of 3 classifications that we could put owners in: explorers, pivoters, and triggerers. Explorers are owners who are literally seeking insights and information. They are not ready to engage, in our opinion, in a program of value acceleration. They're just not there yet. But they do want access to good content, good experts, so on and so forth. They're exploring. Second, pivoters. We call them pivoters because they're going from a relatively low state of action to a much higher state of action. And that could be, a life choice, woke up one morning, realized I'm 72 years old, I better get moving, whatever the motivation might be. And the third category, triggers. These are the folks that are really on a shorter timeline, right? So they are literally triggering a process that might last 12 to 18 months, and they're really, really clear about, I want to transition ownership in the business. Not necessarily exit it, but transition some or all of the ownership internally or externally. So each one of those types of owners has very different needs. I've always said, you cannot lasso an owner and pull them over into the exit planning world. They're not going to come. You have to go into their world. And so those classifications helped us. And when we sit down with an owner, we'll say, here are the 3 classifications. Put yourself in one. Tell us where you are. And they're really quick to say, oh, I'm definitely a pivoter, or I'm a trigger. Fine. Let's talk about that. What does that mean to you? Why do you feel you're there? Or are you cycling back and forth a little uncertain? It's a piece of the unsticking, in a sense, right? Because if you give them that structure, and they can kind of see themselves in it and understand that there are other owners who are also there, it breaks the habit of talking about exit planning clients as businesses. They're just not. So it injects that human aspect, I think.
Where do you see us at EPI? Are we different because we're living this value acceleration?
No, I don't think you're different.
methodology?
I
Okay.
would put you in the pivoter category. I don't know where you would.
Yeah.
But pivoters
Yeah,
for me
fair.
are long-term value acceleration clients, right? They're in for a while, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe longer. So it's a fruitful conversation. Again, those missing conversations that I was talking about, they happen within these contexts, right? Within this framework. But if I can figure, there are conversations that I don't need to have with the pivoter that I would have with the triggerer. So now we've narrowed it down, and we don't have to waste time anymore talking about stuff that doesn't matter. So you go to them where they are, and you help them see where they are. That's going to turn out to be a really powerful, again, contextual location for them.
Do you find, like, in working with business owners that there's more of one kind? Like, where are owners at today when you bring, because, like I said, exit planning is still fairly new, right? So
Yeah, that's right. Well, look, economic conditions right now have probably put people much more in the triggering category,
That's
I would say. But once that there's some anxiety around that, right? It's I'm stuck. I don't want to be here. I want to be somewhere else. But we always say, let's not make any permanent decisions that respond to a temporary problem, right? This too shall pass. It always does. So we don't want to get on the other side of this because there was kind of anxiety or panic even. We do see that. Let's kind of turn down the temperature on it and understand what the individual needs are and what those motivations might be. And then, look, there's always an external macroeconomic context, but it changes, it shifts. So they might be triggering, and then they may decide over time, no, I'm going to move back on that spectrum because now I can see the value of backing up and doing some more work.
Justin, from a personal financial side of things, we always talk about the wealth gap, right? In the CEPA program, we talk a lot about that as well. We were just in one yesterday together. And I think that if Chris was in the room, Justin, Chris would always say, I think financial plan or exit planning really starts with the financial advisor and I don't actually disagree. I think a lot of people think that the value acceleration methodology is really based on finding the value of the business. Once you find that, and you can kind of find it all, right? But I think that maybe the aha moment that a lot of people have thinking about value acceleration is that it's really about who you are outside of the business and where you want to go and who do you want to be, especially for maybe the next generations of owners, maybe guys like your age and my age that are saying, look, I mean, I might have multiple exits along the way. So do you find when you're starting to lead into this success significance approach or conversation with owner, do you find that wealth gap makes a lot of sense for them to start with, or who they want to be outside of the company or who they are?
Absolutely. If we take a step back, I always set the premise this way: no one understands a business owner like another business owner. No one understands us. We go through the pain, the emotions, the emotional ride because of macros, because of micros, because of things with our own business, our own person, the failures, the successes we've had. So ultimately, when a business owner engages in the initial stage of exit planning, something has happened. There's been a catalyst many times. Whether it's they've read a book, maybe it's they heard a podcast, maybe it's their friend down the road did X, Y, Z, maybe somebody had a tragic event, maybe it was a macro or micro issue. Something brought them about, and they're asking now very philosophical, interpersonal questions of why? Why am I running this business? Why am I letting my life slip by? Why am I investing all my capital back into the business? Why? And the questions just multiple at that point. There has to be a guide, a methodology is the term I like to use. There has to be a guide that helps that business owner obtain the answers to the why in a quantifiable manner. I use that term all the time because we want to be able to say, if we're going to spend X dollars, we're going to spend X time, resources, our team, et cetera. We want to get Y results, right? So that's the way we business owners think. So the methodology around the wealth gap, the methodology around a financial advisor, financial planner is the term I like to use, a true planner who's walking them through holistically saying, here's my starting point. Here's where I'm at today, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, business-wise, wherever it is. Here's my starting point. And ultimately, Sean, here's where I want to be because I am the business, or me and my partners are the business, or my family is the business, right? Where do we want to be? If we can identify that point, then everything else is academic. Knowing how to grow the business by a multiple from 2 to 5 or whatever the deal is for their particular industry, that's all academic. We get really smart people like Sean in there, and they can wave the magic wand and it works, right? But understanding the why goes back to that significance because it is freaking hard to go from point A to point B. This idea of value growth is stinking hard. There's no
It
other
is.
way around
It
it.
is.
It will exhaust you. It'll put strain on the family. It'll put strain on your team members. The minute you start change, remember change facilitates change. So you're going to look at your team and say, hey, I may not have the same team here in 5 years. I may not have the same client mix in 5 years. I may not have the same product mix, the same service mix, whatever it is in 5 years, because change facilitates change. So if we can understand the why is the blinders that we're able to help the business owner identify through whatever the journey is to say, yes, it's tough. 2020, yeah, that was tough. Right. I saw grown men, big old burly man's man on their knees crying.
Yeah.
How am I gonna keep my employees involved? Here's the why. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. Has this changed? No, it hasn't. Let's go, man. Let's go. Get up. Let's roll.
That's right.
So if we understand the significance, then we have to understand a starting point and where they truly desire. And only then can we help guide them, can we help motivate them, can we encourage them through these very hard discussions and tough times of value acceleration.
I'll give you an example of something that I think we've sort of shifted a little bit in our thinking. So and it's turned out to be extremely effective. So there's a thing called framing bias, cognitive bias. So the way that you ask a question elicits a certain response in the brain, right? And you'll get a different answer. So here's a framing bias example. We used to say, or owners will ask us, what am I going to do after I exit? Like, what am I going to do? And my response is, it's not what are you going to do, it's who you're going to be. And it's like a light bulb goes off for them. It completely reframes from, I don't know how I'm going to spend my time, right? I do this every day. I don't understand how I'm going to fill the time. And neither does my spouse and significant other, and I'm worried about that. Right. It's actually an identity question. Now I begin to understand I am this person, but the danger in it is I was not much more than that. I was not much more than business owner. I've devoted my life. So the anxiety that's coming, the unstickness, right? That we need to achieve around that is really about emotionally shifting. However you do it, quantitatively, qualitatively, it's about getting them to see a future, but that future has to be, who am I going to be once I leave this home base that I've designed for myself over the years. Entrepreneurs design their experience.
So let me get really real here, okay?
Yep.
So 2 years ago, my wife had an issue because of COVID. I almost watched her die, guys.
Oh boy.
I mean, I had this decision to make where it's like life or death.
Sure.
And as a business owner for almost 30 years now, knowing business, exiting businesses, teaching curriculum, writing books about it, I find myself saying, is the business worth it? Who am I? Now, I had already followed all the methodologies. I knew my 11 core values. I could tell you today, each one of the core values: turn the turtle, dive to the bottom, don't touch the marshmallow, share the pie. I mean, I've got them all with all the different really catchy things,
I love
right?
Don't touch the marshmallow.
I've got them all the catchy things and the studies behind them. But yet it was a dear friend of mine who's sitting there as I'm approached with the opportunity to perhaps exit my company. And he said, Justin, I got one simple question for you. I'm like, dude, what is it? He goes, here's your question. If you, Justin Goodbread, had unlimited time and unlimited resources, not money, resources, what would you do tomorrow that you're not doing today? I could not answer that question because I was the business.
Really?
I knew where the business was going. I knew all the metrics. I knew the data behind it, right? I mean, I had the quintessential perfect business if there was ever such a thing, but I could not answer the question. Mm-hmm. And once that single question placed a seed in my mind, then it stepped back and said, okay, I am not the business. Mm-hmm. I am me. It sounds crazy. It sounds, quintessential, but that's where, as a business owner, we often lose that. Then we went through the exit. I can remember the first 60 days afterwards, I sold the company and kind of made some shifts. And Emily said, get out from underneath my feet. You're driving me crazy. Get out of the house. Go do what you're written to do. Right. So I think, though, if we can help realize that business is the owner and the owner has individual aspirations, they have business aspirations, but if we could peel those apart, then we move it to significance. And only then do we move it to significance.
I agree.
So as you heard, obviously, both of these guys are a great segue. And Allison, I see your questions on LinkedIn, so I'm going to get to those questions here after the break. We got to take a quick 2-minute break. We're going to get some questions from the audience. And I want to kind of shift now from learning about value acceleration to us as 3 business owners, how we incorporate value acceleration into our lives. So give me a quick couple of minutes, folks. We'll be right back.
Get ready to uncover innovative solutions, build deeper relationships, and share transformational experiences at the Exit Planning Summit this May in Scottsdale, Arizona. The summit is the world's largest exit planning-centric event, bringing together professional advisors and their teams from around the globe. It is the premier conference for people committed to working with business owners, accelerating business value, aligning personal and financial strategies for the business owners, and collaborating with the top professionals in the market today. The transformative experience does not stop when the sessions end. Immerse yourself in a distinctive lifestyle experience that transcends expectation. Join us at the magnificent Five Diamond Resort, the Phoenician, the premier luxury hotel in Scottsdale. Immerse yourself in breathtaking views, impeccable service, and unparalleled amenities. Curate a distinctive resort experience infused with a retreat-like ambiance that transforms your well-being. Learn more and reserve your spot now at www.exitplanningsummit.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Exit Is Now podcast, hanging out with Sean and Justin. Allison, I really appreciate your questions, and I really appreciate my team behind in the, I guess you would call that like in the little room behind the glass, right, in a radio setting. They're flashing me the questions up on a Microsoft Word document because still new at this, forgot my little iPad so they could send them to me. So nonetheless, Allison, I want to get to questions. And Sean, it really goes back to what you were talking about kind of right before the break with this meeting the owner where they are. So you described meeting the owner where they are, and Allison's question is, how do you describe that to a business owner when you're actually going in to meet them, and how do you help them realize where they're actually at?
Yeah. So literally, we have a handout where we put it down on the table. We have on one side is the Explorer Pivoter Trigger with a little explanation, just sort of interlocking circles, and then on the other side is our Transition Readiness Questionnaire. So either one of those two will open up larger conversations. So when you ask an owner, hey, let me just kind of explain these things, put yourself in one of these circles, just let me know, you're prepared to have a conversation about that. It's not like it's not like you haven't developed a follow-up set of questions or a follow-up set of bullet points, if you will, to sort of guide the question. Some owners guide the conversation. Some owners will say, I'm not really sure where I am. Great. Another conversation to have with them. There's nothing in there that you can lose on by providing some kind of framework to the owner that's clearly about them. That's the thing. You're offering something that's clearly centered on them. Who doesn't like that? Who doesn't like an advisor coming into the room who they think is going to talk about what they can do for the owner? Like, here's your brochure, all that kind of stuff. When we're training advisors on how to have these conversations, we're always like, please leave the brochure at home. They don't care about the brochure. They don't care what you do. They care that you're listening, that you're paying attention to the things that are happening in the conversation, and you're able to get them to say even more about themselves. So we judge success by, like, if I'm in the conversation, if I speak more than 10% of the time that we have, something has gone horribly wrong, and we're probably just not paying enough attention.
Another question, probably over to you, Justin, about the financial advisor from Allison. Allison wants to know, how do you recommend partnering with the financial advisor so no one is shut out of the conversation?
Wow, that's a powerful question.
Right.
So to me, I view the financial advisor as the quarterback of the business owner's life. And I get a lot of pushback on that, but let me explain why I say that. because the financial advisor is having to have those touchy-feely conversations. I've even already started even illustrating today.
Right.
The financial advisor is going to be with the business owner after the exit. They're going to be there managing now this financial resource that hopefully went from illiquidity to liquidity. They're going to be dealing now with a whole set of emotions involved. What powerful player can you bring on if you're a value acceleration advisor, if you're a CPA attorney, of bringing somebody on who follows a methodology? I keep going back to that word because that's what it is, a methodology, a process that holds true to the end game, that brings context to the entire program, that brings context not just to the immediacy of the decision today, but how the decision today is going to impact the future you 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years from now. See, a true planner, for those of you who are not financial advisors, who maybe are in a different discipline, a true financial planner is trying to prevent the client from robbing themselves of their future selves today and their present self of tomorrow. They're trying to make sure that the decisions they make within the business, their largest asset, and outside the business is going to help that business owner ultimately achieve success. So whenever I'm working with other practitioners, maybe value acceleration advisors, if I'm not doing that, or a CPA's attorneys, we want to collaborate outside the relationship with the client, explain that, hey, here are each of our roles. And ladies and gentlemen, here's where my role is going to be to constantly point to how this decision, I'm going to reaffirm your value acceleration device, opinion, advice, whatever it is. I'm going to affirm that because I can illustrate mathematically, again, quantifying it, how this decision is going to help that business owner 15 years from now. If you can bring that together with the business owner is hungry for that. They're hungry to say, hey, this legal opinion, this accounting opinion, this value advisor's opinion is going to help me get to where I want to be. That's how we incorporate it.
I get asked what the role of the quarterback is. I agree with you. The financial advisor probably fits really well in there, but it's really continuity.
Correct.
It's providing a continuous sort of experience to the owner through a very complex process. Let's not simplify it, oversimplify it. It is complex and it is hard.
It's hard.
I agree. I think like a lot of times, like in our CEPA programs, when the advisors are learning from us, and from my own experience, some would say, like, it's just so simple, right? Once you get into the methodology, right, there's 90-day sprints. You do this, enterprise value assessment. And for me as an owner, I could tell you it's pretty damn hard. And it's because it's not hard once you get into the rhythm, but it's hard because you change the whole way you've run a business. Now, lucky for me, right, I always say I've grown up through value acceleration, but some of the owners you guys are working with, they've run a successful company for 30 years. Oh, yeah. Now you're saying after 30 years of being successful, I want you to be significant. And it kind of blows their mind because now they're like, okay, how do I get my employees involved? How do I balance my life? How do I have family meetings and all of these things? And I think it's a good segue. We got a question from my dad. So Dad's tuning in today too. So Chris, a question from Chris, and this might, I don't know if this describes me or not. I think this is a funny one. He says, Justin and Sean, what is your advice for dealing with problem children who are partners and operate your business? I don't know if my dad's over there busting my chops, or I think we're pretty good partners, but what do you think?
Chris, I think that's why God invented duct tape, buddy. Whenever he gets out of line, use duct tape, throw him in the closet, and take control of the ship again. That's,
Yeah,
no,
that's it.
In all levity aside, what's amazing about Chris and Scott and watching this dynamic is there's a mutual respect. And what got us here in business is not going to get us there. Think about over the last 5 years, the technological advances alone. Think about the demographic movements between your generation, whoever you may be, and the generation beneath us. There is a vast crevasse there. We are having to bridge that in rapid pace. So in order to understand how success is going to arrive, Chris, to answer that particular question, it comes back to mutual respect. And just because the founding member or the senior member of the group believes this is the path, whatever this is, doesn't mean that the junior person in this particular group, based on age, their path is not as equal valuable or could not be a better position at this timing of the business.
What do you think, Sean? Because you're in a family business too, technically,
I am,
right?
Yeah, but I'm a perfect child.
Of course you are, right? That's what I'm saying. Of course he is, right?
Yeah, of course. I think the definition of problem child, for instance, is a really important thing to sort of talk about, right? Again, missing conversations. Behaviors like problem behaviors typically will emerge when someone's needs are not being met. They'll go to a very stressed out place, right? And that may lead to acting out, but there's going to be conflict in one way or another. It could be happening on both sides, but problem child might be a power dynamic that we have to address. We have to talk about that. One thing that often happens, especially I think as you're approaching some type of transition, family transition, predecessor to successor generation, is that everybody begins to get nervous, right? The older generation, if you will, has run the business in a particular way. The newer generation is probably not going to run it in exactly that way. That transfer of authority to actually run the business without, if you transfer it over, then pull it back, transfer it over, then pull it back, transfer it over, oh, I like this part, but I don't like that part. All of a sudden, we're having conversations that can end up being reframed as problem child, right? Or in its worst scenario, I think, down the line, so the next generation is expected to be custodial, what we would call a custodial generation, which is just keep doing what we were doing before.
Yeah. Why change it?
The predecessor, the successor generation has to live not just a successful, but a significant life. You can't do that if you're living the truth of the previous generation. So there has to be room for spanning that authority and then respecting it. Look, again, you can't underestimate how difficult that is for people. And you got a receiving party too. The child is taking on a lot. And they're the people who are often blamed when a business goes downhill. They're blamed for it when maybe it was that those things that really mattered weren't transferred fully over to them to run the business. I know you don't feel that way, Scott.
No, not at all. I think that, well, me and Dad always get a lot of questions, right? Because I think Dad and I have a great relationship, both like on the field and off the field, right? In business and then around the dinner table. And I think that there's a few things that I kind of wrote down as you both of you kind of were talking about it. For me, it's a lot about communication, right? So it's like, the need's not getting met, and it won't ever get met if you just don't talk about it. But communication is hard, right? Especially like respectful and intentional and deliberate communication. And I think that it's kind of like, I would say two other things too, is in terms of operating the business. I think the father or the mother, right, the first generation into the second, needs to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Because I don't do everything just like Dad has done. But Dad, I give him credit because he's kind of relinquished that control. That's got to be kind of weird. I could tell you that I kind of want to segue into us being owners ourselves. I could tell you for me, the biggest thing in operating Exit Planning Institute now as an owner and the president of the company is now that we've kind of allowed Dad to relinquish control and they've empowered, decentralized Dad from the business is now kind of centralized around me. And so now it's like the third generation, if you will, which is my leadership team. And I think decentralizing, and I didn't give Dad enough credit when he was doing this, because so this year is all about kind of the decentralization of me and the empowerment of a leadership team around us that carries the torch, understands the core values. So it's not a Chris or Scott Snider thing. It's really about the community that is the Exit Planning Institute. But that's hard. Like, talk to me about the business that you own with your dad, and I guess how's that look for you guys, if you don't mind?
Yeah, no problem. So our family has owned a millwork in Oklahoma City where I grew up for about 57 years now. Started by my dad's dad and his uncle, and then eventually passed to my dad, and eventually will presumably pass to me and my sister in one form or another. But my dad's 78. He doesn't really work that much. He goes in, signs some checks, things like that. So he enjoys his life. We built the business to survive his departure, potentially, right? When he wanted to retire, we groomed a general manager for a long time to really set up that less owner dependency, right? Which obviously drives value way down. So we wanted to be careful about that. But I'm not moving back to Oklahoma City. I'm not going to run the business actively. So it's raised really two scenarios for us. Do we keep it as a more passive shareholding family, or do we sell it internally or externally? Big questions, right? And I sit down when I'm home with my dad. We go to breakfast and we'll talk for 3 or 4 hours about this. I get weekly reports. We set up a family board so that if something happened to Dad, we would actually understand enough to go talk to the banker. For a while, we didn't even really understand who that was. Yeah. We didn't have a relationship with him. So we've started to take all of those steps that are necessary. What it came down to, though, I think at the end of the day, is my parents from the beginning never, ever pressured us to work in the business. So they wanted us to have a wider field of vision than that. And I truly love them for that, because I think it's a hard thing to do for a business owner to say, this is probably not going to pass into an active management role. Now, we groomed management for a long time. The general manager 2-3 years ago got a really serious form of cancer and almost died. So then we were looking at, well, there aren't going to be very many choices if he goes away. And we realized not only had we had lowered owner dependency and transferred knowledge, but now we had a dependency on a certain management team, and it's really a hard business to learn how to run. So you can kind of have that catch-22 of, I want to back off and transfer some of this to the next, but then you could lose people, right? And you got to step back in.
So would you say that your dad's a pivoter then?
I'd say my dad is more of a triggerer. At this point.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's a triggerer.
So Justin, you've actually exited a couple businesses now, but 2 or 3? 3, 2, 10? 5 businesses?
6,
5 businesses right now. Okay. But maybe sticking with family here. You have kids. Have you ever thought about getting into business with your kids? If they're listening right now, here we are.
Yes, I have actually. So, I was sitting in a hole in South Georgia at the age of 20 years old. I was up to my waist in mud and slime. I'm just about 100 degrees outside, and I asked myself the question, I want to be doing this in a landscape company with multiple employees at the age of 50, which seemed really old at the time. Now it's not so old. But I remember asking myself that question. And more importantly, I said, do I want my kids see me do this? Now, that not knocking it, because I had a great business, and I have a lot of good friends who are in that particular business and grew up. But as I was sitting there asking myself that question, in the back of my head, through all these various business ventures that I've been on, it's always like, how can I teach my children business? How can I teach my children work ethic? So my dad and mom grew up poor, like with 7 O's in between the P and the R. Poor, okay? So the only way that my generation could go was up financially. Well, because of methodologies taught through the Value Acceleration Program, Chris and Scott, I was telling Sean just off the air, it's like, I am indebted to this family and for what you guys have invested in my life. You have changed the dynamic of not just my family, but I was able to teach my brother and my sister, who are both business owners, the same methodologies, and their business are best in class today. Now I'm watching my children, and they have a true choice. What is their life going to be going forward? They're not where my mom and dad were, at the bottom of the economic system. They have a choice in life. So what better way than to teach business or teach values than to have business? We were even considering, hey, do we buy a boat? Do we travel around the Caribbean and have our children have like a boys' boat waxing thing, right? At every port where they go and wax boats and scrape barnacles off. Little crazy things like that. So I actually see myself somewhere in the next 2 to 3 years launching a business to teach the most important things of life to my children through business. I think it's that powerful for us as parents.
I mean, it's been life-changing for me.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can remember at 16 starting a landscaping company, and Dad was the bank, right? So he helped finance the thing. So I get my first truck and lawnmower. But I could tell you, I would say too, maybe it's growing up through value acceleration, but growing up through as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, has taught me a lot too. The other thing that I think it's taught me, and I'm big on this. I talked about this with Dad when we were on our last episode. It's also about a balance in life. And I think that, like some hard driving entrepreneurs that we all are, we have it at our advisory practices. We have millwork practices, I have a millwork company, and we have different things. I think that the question I'd have really for both of you, we were talking before this at breakfast, like the travel that we have and all kinds of stuff. How do you find balance in life? How do you get to spend time with your wife and kids outside of business, just hanging out?
So I don't believe there's such a thing called balance, first of all. I believe that we live a blended life. That wherever you're at, be present. And so what I've done personally now at this chapter of my life is at the beginning of the year, I go a quarter in advance and I block off, here's my family time, right? Here's when we're going to travel. Here's when we have special events. Here's when things that the kids are involved in. And that is sacred. It's already on the calendar. Don't touch it. Saturdays and Sundays to me is sacred time. That is, I'm on the tractor, man. I'm on the farm. I'm getting cuts on my fingers. I'm having fun. That's my therapy time for my family. During the week, it's game, and it's game on. Wherever I'm at, I'm going to pour 150% into it. I like that. That is me. If I wasn't 150% into the business on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, running out 16, 17 hours, I would go crazy. That's who I am. But my family now, after almost 30 years of running business, they sit here and say, hey, Justin has a blended life in such a way. There's no such thing for me as balance because I can't equalize it. Certain times of the year, it's, man, I'm in business. The kids are doing their thing. We're having fun. Other times it's, hey, I'm going to go to Florida for a month and a half. Don't touch me. I'm going to go fishing for a month and a half. Leave me alone. That is my family time. So I look at it as more of a blended position.
Yeah, and same kind of question over to you too, Sean. Like Sean, if you know Sean's like one of the best golfers I certainly know, and I think I would assume that golf is kind of a stress reliever, maybe sometimes, I don't know, for you. But there's other things, right?
Golf,
and there's other
right?
things like you. There's other things that I've seen knowing you for a long time now, where you're kind of blending or balancing as well. So how do you do it?
I learned to say no.
We were talking about that.
It was just that simple. My good friend George Pilliton, he for a long time we would talk. First thing we'd get together for coffee, and the first thing he'd say to me is, "Have you learned how to say no yet? Have you learned how to say no? Are you saying no?" And I finally realized that I was never going to be in control of my journey until I learned how to do that, until I was able to set the boundary, not just to say no for saying no, but to really understand why I was saying no, why some things were more important to me than others. I play a whole lot more golf than I used to.
You do.
Right? Which is great. I would say the majority of lessons that I have learned in life came from golf. Really. I mean, the complexity of it, the things you have to do to sort of think through it and problem solve in real time, the beauty of it, the pace of it, the people that I meet. It's a really important part of my life. So there was a time when I didn't have time to play golf. And I realized the reason I don't have time is I'm not saying no to enough stuff to make space for that in my life. So as soon as I learned how to say no, the whole thing changed. The whole game changed at that point.
I could probably take a little bit of that advice myself, to be totally honest with you. So, gentlemen, we're hitting the top of the hour. So I think that having two experts here, both as owner experts in exit planning and value acceleration, and both as advisors to owners, I think that we should leave the audience with a couple of words of advice. So, and my ask, Sean, to you is, if I'm an owner, and maybe if you're looking at me as a business owner, what kind of advice do you have for an owner that's saying, okay, I want to pivot and I want to start to embark on this value acceleration journey? What's your advice?
My advice to owners is always, and it goes back to Justin, we were talking about this earlier, this is a very complex process. So how can we simplify the work, right? How can we really kind of, without making it simplistic, that's not the point. How can we simplify the work? And my advice is always to an owner, if you're not sure about this, do one thing. Let's just figure out one thing for you to do to start this, because it's going to get easier from here. It's going to feel less friction, right? So doing that, choosing that one thing to do is really important, because it's going to have to be a win for the advisor, for the owner, for their family, for the employees, for the customers. Everybody's got to win on that one. So if you can choose that thing carefully, and the owner can say, hey, we're 60 days into this thing, and I'm already seeing real improvements. I'm feeling better. Even though it was hard at first, I'm feeling better. Then doing the next thing is not that hard.
Justin, same question over to you. So I'm an owner just starting this process. What kind of advice do you have for me?
So at about age 19, I jumped on a fairway mower for the first time. Talking about golf, right? Jumped on a fairway mower for the first time, and my instructor superintendent, he said, I want you to draw a straight line with this mower that ran about 25 miles an hour down this fairway, long par 5. Just put a straight line and stripe this fairway. I'd never done that before. And he stepped up beside me and he said, see that tree way out there is a pine tree that had a broken off top? I said, yeah. He said, look at that. Don't take your eyes off of it. Drive. Boom. Fast as this thing will go. Okay, sure. And I kept my eyes on it, leaned into the throttle, and boom, raced down the middle of the fairway. Got to the other side. I'm talking about laser straight. Very efficient. Why do I say that? Because if we as owners know ourselves, it's we as owners, I'm an owner, if we as owners know where we're going, that destination out in the future, then we're going to look back and appreciate the efficiency, the balance or blended lifestyle we've lived, the impact we've had on those we have the honor and privilege to serve, whether it be our clients, our team members, our colleagues, whatever it is. We're going to look back and live a life that is impacted and we live fulfilled. If we don't know where we're going with great specificity, then we're going to look back with regret. And we're going to be in that statistic that says, only 4% of business owners exit their business and are satisfied? We're going to not be in that 4% because we didn't know specifically where we were going to try to achieve. So my challenge to you is no matter where you're at in this phase of business, whether you're a seasoned professional like us around the table, or whether you're just a novice at this thing of value acceleration, where do you want to be? If you know that, rest of it's academic.
Well, gentlemen, powerful advice from both of you. I would say if you're listening in, certainly tune in or LinkedIn with link up, I guess I should say, whatever the word is, to both of these gentlemen. They share great content. A lot of the stuff that we talked today, you could see them there. We will be back live on February the 8th, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to dive even deeper in where I bring my two directors in. I got my Director of Business Development, my Director of Marketing, joining me at the table to talk about how, as employees, as executives, as business leaders here at EPI, how are they embracing exit planning? The episode that you're watching today will be live for you on Monday on all of your podcast platforms. With that, subscribe at exitisnow.com, and thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time.